Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome to Fear Street Explored, where your worst nightmares live. This week, I'm excited to visit Haunted. I didn't like this book, and I think it was the first solid clunker of the Fear Street series. It's a very thin story and about 100 pages too long, with a twist that can be seen a mile away. We have poor Melissa being haunted by an infuriating ghost with one of the worst attempts at a redemption arc I've read. If you skipped this one, you'd be saving yourself some frustration. This 1990 cover is very misleading and would have been creepier if they used the actual ghost described in the story. This ghost is giving 90s heartthrob, when in reality, the ghost is a greasy, long-haired, drunken creep with a persecution complex. Our front take says, "There's a prowler in Melissa's room, but is he dead or alive?" Which makes this story sound more interesting than it actually is. Our back take says, "The Night Stalker," which I guess there are some similarities to Richard Ramirez going on here if you wanted to reach far enough. But let's check out the full blurb on the back. Melissa woke up screaming. The prowler was at her window. Or was he? The recent headlines about the Fear Street prowler had everyone on edge. Her father now kept a loaded pistol in his bedroom. That made it even more frightening and real. Then the haunting began. Her new car driving as if somebody else had taken control, her birthday presents ripped open by unseen hands, an invisible force trying to push her out the bedroom window. Out of the shadows of her bedroom came a menacing figure. Who was he? Did he really come from beyond the grave? And why had he come to kill her? If Melissa doesn't solve the mystery fast, these questions will haunt her. To death. Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with an introduction to Melissa Dryden freaking out in bed. She's awoken by a strange noise at the window and is scrambling to get out of the room. Her dad comes flying in to see what all the commotion is about, but it's a little anticlimactic. In true Stine fashion, the noise at the window is just a tree branch scraping against the house. In Melissa's defense, there is a Fear Street prowler wreaking havoc on the neighborhood, so she has good reason to be a bit jumpy. Her mom enters the scene to see what all the hollering is about, and this quickly devolves into accusing Melissa of staying out too late with her boyfriend Buddy. It's the last week of summer break, so they've been trying to get in some extra time together. Melissa's mom then becomes an early contender for a useless adult because she suggests that Melissa open up the bedroom window to get some fresh air, even though we just established that there's a Fear Street prowler running around. Her parents have also made like 1,000 references to Melissa being super skinny, so I guess that's gonna be her defining physical trait. Her dad then makes the case for being a useless adult too, because to comfort his daughter, he takes her into his bedroom and shows her a loaded pistol, which he proceeds to spin the gun around his finger after confirming it's loaded. I know I would feel much safer with gun handling like that. She's gonna end up shot by her own trigger-happy father. Melissa is just surrounded by turds though, because when she heads back to bed, she reflects on her terrible evening with Buddy. He had been on vacation for 2 weeks, so she was really excited to see him again. But once they got in the car, things went south. Buddy got super handsy and wouldn't take no for an answer until Melissa literally had to hop out of the car to get away. Then he had the nerve to act shocked that she was mad at him. We jump to the next day, and Melissa's busy reading some Stephen King in her bedroom. She suddenly feels a cold wash over her, but can't figure out the source. Her father comes home and has an early birthday present for her, a brand new blue Pontiac Firebird. That's quite the gift. We learn that her dad grew up poor, and this is how he shows his love now that he's rich, because even Melissa knows this is too much. She races off to show her best friend, Della O'Connor, who was last seen in the overnight, where she was our fearless protagonist, who may have accidentally killed a guy. He was a creeper though, so it was okay. Melissa wastes no time testing out this Firebird, and is soon going 75 down the winding roads of Shadyside. She feels cold wash over her again, like when she was in her bedroom earlier, and the car suddenly jerks to the side. This scares her enough to slow down, but once again she can feel a cold presence, and the steering wheel starts jerking around. She then thinks she can hear somebody whispering her name directly into her ear, and slows down to 25 as she tries to maintain control of the car. She tells herself just a couple more blocks to go, when suddenly the steering wheel moves hard to the left, pulling her directly in the path of an oncoming truck. We abruptly jump to a few days later at Melissa's birthday party, and learn the new car's in the garage after she nearly crashed to see if there's something wrong with the steering. Preppy Pete, also from the overnight, walks over and gives her a Weird Al CD for her birthday because it's 1990. We're then introduced to a bunch of other background kids we frequently have name dropped in these Fear Street party scenes, and I'm not going to list them all because they actually don't matter. There's just a lot of dancing, bad jokes, and potato chip snacking going on for quite a few pages. Eventually, it's after midnight and Melissa goes to open her presents that she stacked in her bedroom, but when she opens the door, she finds them all torn open. Later, her parents come home and she decides not to tell them about the presents, for reasons unknown. Everyone is way too casual about this shredded present situation in my opinion. I'd want to know who the fuck was coming for my gifts. Later that night, Melissa is in bed when she suddenly comes face to face with the Fear Street prowler, lurking in the shadows next to her bedroom window. When he steps forward, it's like the man is made of shadows and has no features on his face. She starts shrieking for help, but when her parents run in, the prowler is nowhere to be found. Melissa is confused because there's no way he could have hopped out of the window so quickly, but she's certain she saw him in her room. Her parents think it was just a nightmare and offer to close the bedroom window, but Melissa insists that they keep the window open because she wants the breeze. This again makes no sense to me. I'd be nailing that window shut myself before sleeping again. Melissa struggles to fall back asleep and wanders over to the window to gaze out at Fear Street when suddenly two cold, strong hands shove her from behind. She nearly topples out of the window, but is able to grab the edges and push her way back inside, where she can see the room is empty. She knows she didn't just imagine it, but feels like she has no choice but to crawl in bed like nothing happened. I'd be sleeping on the floor of my parents' bedroom at this point. After she falls asleep, we the reader watch as a cold, dark shadow looms over her. The next day, Melissa is watching Buddy clean out his garage while she tells him all about her weird night with the shadow person in her room. She then runs over to the mall with Della and another rich girl named Chrissy, where we're treated to a multi-page shopping event. All this shopping serves to establish that Melissa feels guilty about having so much money. Meanwhile, Chrissy declares she thinks poor people are basically just gross. Melissa drives home in her mom's car because hers is still in the shop, when she feels a familiar cold engulf her. This time though, a full-blown ghost boy appears in the passenger seat. He's pale with long, dark, greasy hair, dangerous-looking eyes, and is fully dressed in denim. That's all we get to see though, because Melissa rear-ends the car in front of her. There's not enough damage for either driver to be all that concerned about, and they both drive away without further issue. We cut to Melissa telling her parents about the accident, and they're naturally more concerned about this ghost boy she claims to have seen, and they think she's going crazy. We also learn in passing that Melissa's parents are not just a little rich, but loaded. They even have a live-in maid named Marta. Melissa's parents want her to come to Vegas with them while they attend a convention next week, but she doesn't want to go. This just gives Stine a good excuse to have Melissa home alone at some point later in the story. After dinner, Melissa heads upstairs to get ready for her date with Buddy when the ghost boy appears again. This time, Melissa isn't scared and demands to know who he is. He then acts shocked that she doesn't remember because, according to him, Melissa killed this boy. She tries to grab his arm but reaches right through him. She then wants to know how she supposedly killed him, but he says death messes with your memory, so he doesn't know how he died, just that she killed him. He also reveals his name is Paul, but he can't remember his last name. Throughout all this conversation, Paul seems to really have an issue with how wealthy Melissa's family is. She tries to tell him that he must be haunting the wrong house, but he's certain she killed him, and now he wants to kill her in revenge. Melissa's able to convince him not to kill her, and offers to instead to find out who did and how he died. Paul still thinks it was her, but agrees to wait since he can kill her anytime he wants apparently. Melissa then drives over to Buddy's house for their date, and the entire time she's blown through stop signs and getting honked at, so maybe Melissa should take a break from driving until she's in a more stable state. On their date, Buddy drives her around Shadyside, while Melissa tells him everything about Ghost Paul. Buddy can't remember hearing anything about a Paul being killed, but more importantly, he thinks Melissa is going crazy and needs to get herself some help. She tries to prove she's not crazy by taking Buddy back to her room to show him the ghost, which goes about as well as you might imagine it would. At her house, they get startled by what they think is a ghost, but it ends up just being Marta, the maid. Melissa keeps calling for Paul to come out like he's some sort of shy dog, but he won't. So Melissa and Buddy end up making out on her bed instead. During all this heavy petting is when Paul decides to appear, causing Melissa to scream and for Buddy to fall off the bed. Buddy is face to face with a furious Paul, but Buddy can't see him. This really makes Melissa look crazy as she converses with Paul right in front of Buddy, so it looks like she's just talking to herself. Melissa gets frustrated with Buddy for not believing her and she sends him home. Paul reappears and starts taunting her about being a little rich girl some more. Paul is really bitter and unpleasant to deal with. Melissa tries to chase him off, but he reminds her that he's here to kill her unless she can prove she isn't the one who killed him. We then jump to the next day, and Melissa's finishing up at the library where she's been looking through rolls of microfilm, trying to find anything about a boy named Paul dying, but she's come up empty-handed. She runs into Della, and they decide to visit her cousin Tracy to see if she might know anything about a boy named Paul dying recently, since she goes to a different high school nearby. This all goes nowhere though, so after like 15 pages of filler, we're no closer to knowing who Paul is or how he died. When Melissa returns home, she can see that the front door is wide open and thinks it could be the Fear Street Prowler. She peers in the window and spots Buddy pacing around the house. She confronts him and he says her mom let him in before she went to the mall. The two chat like normal and then decide to head to the Red Heat later that night. Apparently, Shadyside is full of teen dance clubs because in an earlier book we had the Mill as the teen hotspot. The Red Heat is something else though. Before it had become a teen dance club, Red Heat had been a farm equipment warehouse. From the outside, the long tall building still looked like a warehouse, but all thoughts of farm machinery vanished as soon as they stepped into the hangar-sized dance floor. The concrete floor, nearly a city block long, had been covered in long strips of 50s colored linoleum, Pinks and blacks and oranges, pale green, aqua and maroon, all unmatched, all clashing. When the long rows of colored flashing lights struck the dance floor from above, the floor seemed to come to life, seemed to dance right along with the dancers, and the warehouse became a different world. The walls had all been painted red, although it was seldom bright enough to see their true color. The rafters above had also been painted red. The long juice bar and all the other furnishings were red, in keeping with the name Red Heat. Giant black speakers, mounted at regular intervals from the rafters, blasted music down to the floor, which reverberated from the booming sound and echoed the music right back up beyond the rafters, trapping the dancers in the middle, encircling them with music, holding them as if it was a powerful spell. At the Red Heat, Melissa and Buddy end up fighting over the ghost situation because she's annoyed that he still doesn't believe her. She storms out of the club and out into this giant empty parking lot. She comes across a group of guys getting drunk and tries to sneak away before they notice her, but soon they're all catcalling her aggressively. One of the boys stumbles over and trips at her feet. When he looks up, she can see that it's Ghost Boy Paul, but he's still clearly alive. The scene gets tense as the drunk group taunts Melissa, and Paul becomes more aggressive with her, grabbing onto her and not letting her leave. He's drunk and being really nasty to her, with vague threats of sexual assault. Melissa is really confused because Paul doesn't seem to have any idea who she is during all this nastiness. Eventually, she's able to break away from the group once they start fighting with each other, but the drunks do chase her across the parking lot for a bit in a tense scene. Melissa makes her way back to Buddy, and now can't decide if all that was real or if she came across a whole group of ghosts. Once back at home, she's still shaken up over the Paul situation in the parking lot, because he seemed to absolutely hate her, even though this version of Paul didn't even seem to know her. Ghost Paul tries to visit her that night, but she screams at him to go away and he vanishes, but not before threateningly telling her that he's not finished with her yet. The next day, Melissa has a plan. She's realized she recognizes one of the boys that was with Paul last night. His name is Frankie and he works at the grocery store, so she decides to interrogate him while he's at work and on his best behavior. Frankie agrees to talk with her on his break, and it becomes apparent that Paul is still very much alive, which truly confuses Melissa, and she begins to think maybe she really is crazy. While walking back to her car, she feels like she's being followed and starts to run. A hand grabs her by the shoulder, and surprise, it's the real-life Paul. He wants another chance from last night, but he's a complete creeper and an asshole, so Melissa rightfully tells him to piss off. It's clear that this Paul's alive, and the one at her house is a ghost, but for whatever reason, Melissa is struggling to grasp this. It's so obvious that I was under the impression she knew last night, right after the parking lot incident, but I guess not. The alive Paul keeps harassing Melissa and wants to know how she knew his name, but she just gets in her car and drives away. When she gets home, she finds Ghost Paul on her bed, struggling to maintain his presence as he flickers in and out of reality. Melissa still isn't grasping that she's dealing with two Pauls though, so she's like, "How did you get in my house so fast from the parking lot?" It literally takes 5 pages of talking through this together, but eventually Melissa comes to the conclusion that Paul is actually somehow alive and also a ghost from the future at the same time, so she can still save Paul from dying. Probably. Melissa is so happy with this reveal that she even tries to hug Paul, even though he's done nothing but threaten and insult her this entire story. Paul takes this reveal a different way though, and is like, "Oh, I'm a ghost from the future because you just haven't killed me yet," and gets angry at her. At this point, I would welcome the opportunity to kill Paul. He's a complete prick when alive, and a whiny bitter asshole in death. Melissa promises that she won't kill alive Paul, and offers to take Ghost Paul to the alive Paul's house tonight, so they can all sort this out together, because I'm sure that will go well. We're then outside Paul's house in a bad neighborhood that's full of comically stereotypical bad kids, all dressed up in leather jackets, like we're dealing with greasers from the 50s. Ghost Paul floats through the front door while Melissa waits out front. We then switch perspectives and watch Ghost Paul spy on his living self. Alive Paul is getting drunk, and we watch as he tries calling Melissa's house and then hangs up the phone angrily because he's a creepy loser. Ghost Paul keeps trying to get Alive Paul's attention, but can't, so we see Paul get even drunker with his friends from earlier and learn that Paul is the Fear Street Prowler. Alive Paul tells his friends how they can get some extra cash, and they all load up into the car to head to Fear Street so he can go steal some shit. Ghost Paul again tries to stop him because he knows he's going to get himself killed breaking into homes, but he can't. We then watch as Alive Paul breaks into a house, someone screams inside, and then he flees the scene with his friends before switching back to Melissa. She left Paul's house early because she thought the neighborhood was too creepy with all those greasers running around. Ghost Paul appears to tell her that he failed and wasn't able to warn himself. He fades away feeling powerless. Melissa volunteers to warn Paul to stay away from her because she doesn't want to end up killing him somehow. Melissa is kinda stupid because Ghost Paul is like, "You killed me, so I'm trying to warn myself to stay away from you." Yet here Melissa wants to directly get in contact with Alive Paul again, even though contact with her will lead to his death. This whole book could be easily solved by just staying at her friend's house or going to Vegas with her parents. It's then the next day, and Melissa's making plans to visit Paul, so she can tell him to stay away from her. It's unclear why she can't just call him, other than Stine's plot calls for her to see him again in person. Melissa finds him that night, on the corner with his friends getting drunk like usual. They have more gross catcalling banter before she's able to get Paul off to the side to talk to him one-on-one. Paul is a fucking predator though, and roughly starts grabbing on her and starts to drag her off by the wrist into the dark parking lot with an evil look in his eyes. Remind me again why she's trying to save this guy? She should shoot him in the dick. Paul blurts out that he knows that she lives on Fear Street, and she attempts to warn him to stay away from her. This confuses him because he's like, "You've been following me around for days, just to tell me to stay away from you?" Okay. Not to defend this prick, but it is confusing. Paul ends up storming off, and once again, Melissa has accomplished nothing other than giving Paul more reasons to keep interacting with her. It's then the next day, and Melissa receives a call from Della that she's stuck at her cousin's house, so Melissa won't be able to stay over at her place while her parents are out of town. Plus, maid Marta is also out of town visiting her brother. This means Melissa will be home alone with a ghost Paul, and probably real-life drunk one too. We spend a few pages of Melissa nervously trying to kill time while home alone. She finally goes upstairs to change clothes, and wonders if Ghost Paul is watching her undress, which she finds exciting. I swear to God, if Stine pairs these two up in the last few pages, I'm gonna throw this laptop out the window. Melissa tries to go to bed around 11:30, but it's too hot in her bedroom, so she sleeps in her parents' air-conditioned bedroom. At 12:15, she wakes up to a noise and realizes the Fear Street Prowler is trying to break into the bedroom window. Apparently, Ghost Paul never informed her that he was the Prowler all along, something I once again thought she knew until now. When she sees Paul, she's briefly relieved, until she notices he's drunk and strangely calm about what he's doing. He starts shouting at her how she thinks he's not good enough for her, and keeps making vague references to RAPE. Melissa begs him to leave because she doesn't want to kill him, but he blocks the exit and keeps trying to force her onto the bed, so she has no choice but to grab the pistol from her dad's nightstand. She points the gun at him, and he soon knocks it out of her hand, and the two are wrestling on the ground for it. Paul ends up getting a hold of the gun and taunts her by asking what good all her money now is if she's gonna be dead. This boy is laser focused on Melissa being rich. Paul gets ready to shoot Melissa, but suddenly his own ghost appears and knocks the gun out of his hand and tosses it over to Melissa, who catches it and maybe accidentally shoots Paul right in the chest. It's not super clear if she did it intentionally or not. Paul drops to the floor and bleeds out right in front of her. Hooray. Stine is ready for some real fuckery though, because Melissa wanders over to Ghost Paul through the blood puddle, and then soon the two are to full embrace and kissing each other. Ghost Paul cared too much for her to let himself shoot her, and Melissa has developed a crush on this awful ghost somehow. I guess Melissa won him over at the mall when she chewed out her rich friend Chrissy for being rude to poor people. What romance. It's worth reading the page itself actually. Why did you let me kill you? He stood so close to her, yet the air wasn't cold. I couldn't stand to see you killed, he said finally. What? But you knew I would kill Paul if you took the gun from him. Yes, I knew it would happen, he said, turning to look her in the eyes, but I couldn't let him kill you. I care about you too much. I care about you too, Melissa cried. The ghost pulled her close and wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her face up to his, and they kissed. I can feel you, Paul, Melissa cried. I really can. I can feel you now. Yuck. Ghost Paul decides now's the time to cross over, and Melissa's distraught because she can still feel the warmth of his lips. Kill me too, Stine. Good God, this is bad. Melissa then hears commotion downstairs and finds Buddy, who came to check on her and heard a gunshot. She shows him the dead body, and they decide to call the police. And that's how this one ends. Melissa developed a crush on a violent, drunken thief and potential rapist, but not really, just his ghost, so it's totally fine. Everything turned out fine. Overall, I thought Haunted just wasn't very good. It was heavily padded and seemed centered around an idea that Stine struggled to flesh out. Paul was just too unlikable, both in mortal and ghost form, to garner any sympathy from me. Plus, watching Melissa repeatedly tempt fate for no reason by contacting this prick was mildly infuriating. Not to mention the climax was basically, oh, you're not a rich snob, so I guess I won't let myself rape and murder you. What a happy ending. I'm gonna give this one 1 out of 5 blue Pontiac Firebirds. I think Stine was in over his head on what he was trying to pull off with this one. Okay, for Fear Street deaths, in Haunted, there was one. This was when Paul finally gets shot and bleeds out on the carpet. She should have shot him in the dick first though. This brings our Fear Street series total to 7 deaths. In Fat 90s Moments, we had 5 this week. These included Weird Al CDs, a mall shopping montage, microfilm, VCRs, and phone book stalking. This brings our Fear Street series total to 45. For Useless Adults, we had 2. They're not the worst though. We had the mother opening the windows with a prowler on the loose, and the dad twirling loaded guns like this is a western. This brings our Fear Street series total to 10. In Unhealthy Relationships, now known as Tainted Love, thanks to Not Sisgit 7967, is back once again with 2 to add to the count. We have Melissa and Bobby, where he opens the book groping her to the point she has to escape the car. We're also going to include Melissa and Ghost Paul, because that little relationship was fucked from the get-go, and only got worse by the end. This gives us a Fear Street series total of 7. In A Fear Street First, there was no cheesy ending. Melissa shoots Paul, makes out with his abusive ghost, then steps over his dead body with her actual boyfriend to call the police. It's all fairly grim. This leaves our Fear Street series total at 6. Well, that's it for Haunted. I thought this book was jam-packed with filler, and thought Paul was such a thoroughly unlikable character that I failed to see any sort of redemption with his ghost like I would think I was supposed to. Next week, we're looking at Halloween Party, and I'm excited to see what a Fear Street Halloween has in store, since the Goosebumps books usually put out some good stories. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Haunted. Am I being too hard on the Pauls? Why couldn't Melissa just stay away? Did you think Maid Marta was going to have something going on? Or is that just me hoping for an actual twist? Also, what did you think of my Greaser clips this week? I branched away from horror, but Greaser is just too good of a theme to pass up. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,